Nick, it's very good to see you. We're talking about the new retirement account contribution limits for 2023. The IRS just announced it will boost the max contributions to 401ks by $2,000, bringing the total now to $22,500. That's the largest increase on record. What's behind that significant jump?
Well, the dollar doesn't go as far anymore. We're starting to see that with inflation. We've been talking about that, how inflation's up, the CPI, consumer price index is up. You see it right there, 7.7% in October. It was 8.2% in September. And so the answer is to allow people to save more. You remember in the past, the goal was to be a millionaire. And if you think about it, a millionaire now doesn't live like a millionaire did in the 1980s. And so the answer is to try and help people save more. And that's what they're doing here.
All right, so I want to show you this graphic because it gives me a lot of anxiety. But as we take a look at the average balance of 401ks broken down by generation, how important is it that we be maxing out our contributions?
Well, it should be the biggest deal. When I looked at this, when I saw boomers, Gen X, millennials, and Gen Z, I think a lot of people look at that and they're like, well, who are these people? Well, boomers, no, that's the people that right now are between 58 to 76 years old. Gen X is 42 to 57, millennials is 26 to 41 years old, and the Gen Zs are 18 to 25 years old. So what we're seeing here is that the boomers are the biggest savers. They have the biggest amount, but if you think a $208,000 account is not going to go as far as it did in the past.
Of course.
And so if you're going to be 65 years old, you're probably going to live 20 to 30 years and as really unemployed. And so that means that $208,000, that's the average, has got to be able to last 20 to 30 years. It doesn't last that much anymore. So a couple points here is the other generations, what they need to be seeing here is they need to be learning from what the boomers are going through. The other generations need to be looking at this as a wake-up call to say save more, because if you look at that chart, the other generations are saving less and less and less. The biggest generation saving is the boomers, but the other generations need to realize we got to save more if this is going to work for us in retirement. And this is a big reason, I think, Aaron, why you have these younger generations who are giving up completely on retirement. They're giving up on maybe the traditional look at what retirement is actually going to be. They're pretty much thinking, I'm going to retire from one job to another job, work there for a little bit, retire from that job to another job. And I think they're fully expecting to always continue working.
That is a whole topic for another video, Nick. But I think you're right. I think you're totally right. Let's talk about contribution limits for IRAs. They're also set to increase to $6,500 from $6,000. That's a limit that hasn't changed since 2019. As we take a look at all the new account limit contribution changes for 2023, Nick, is there anything that sticks out to you here?
Well, what I noticed when I saw this is granted, for the most part, everything went up a little bit. But the one thing that just stood out in my mind is that the catch-up contributions, the IRA and the Roth IRA catch-up contributions. And what that means is that's for people who are over 50 years old. So in the past, if somebody was under 50 years old, they could save $6,000. And then if they were over 50 years old, they could add an extra $1,000 to it. Now they could save $7,000 in an IRA or Roth IRA. Well, now they're increasing that number to where instead of $6,000, you can save $6,500. That's great. But what they did is for the catch-up contributions, they kept that the same. So that really drew out to me that there's two groups of people here that really didn't benefit. The older people, because they're not allowed to save more in the catch-up contribution because that number stayed the same. And also, if you think about it, if you have a company that you're working for and they don't have a 401k, and you've been saving all of your money in the IRAs and Roth IRAs, you aren't able to really get ahead too much more because they didn't increase the catch-up contribution. All that you benefited was an extra $500, which, again, with inflation isn't much. I mean, that's a trip to the grocery store. And so what that's meaning is that people are wanting to get ahead and they can't save too much more in an IRA or Roth IRA. They're going to have to save their investments in investment categories that have the highest taxes because they won't be able to use tax deductible IRAs or tax-free Roth IRAs. They're going to have to save it in tax accounts and in after-tax accounts that are taxed on ordinary dividends, capital gains, all that stuff, and it's going to put them into a position tax-wise in the future where they're not well off at all.
I'm really glad you brought that up because I know the topic that is near and dear to your heart, which is tax planning, of course. And I think that there are a lot of us who contribute to the 401ks, but they're also known as retirement tax bombs. So in what instances then should we be considering those accounts where we are paying our taxes now?
Well, what you need to be doing is, again, you alluded to the 401k and the IRA being a ticking tax time bomb waiting to go off. You have to look at this as everything that you take out of an IRA or a 401k later on is taxed as if you earned it. So then you think, well, and most people think, well, as I get older, I'm going to have less taxes. And what most people find out later on when they're in retirement is that because of required minimum distributions and all these other things, as they get older, they actually don't drop in their tax brackets. If anything, they stay about the same or maybe even go up a little bit more. So you have these people that have saved all this money in these accounts. And take, for instance, right now, I think we're at a tax discount versus, and there's the chart right there, versus other times in history, we're at a low tax bracket, low tax rates. Taxes, if the government does absolutely nothing, taxes are already set up to go higher by 2026. It's already written.
Right.
All the 2017 tax cuts are set to expire on January 1 of 2026. And so if you think your IRA and your 401k are ticking tax time bombs now, just wait until 2026 when the rates go up. It's almost like, we go into this and we think, I'm a millionaire. Nah, you're really not. You're a 700,000-aire because Uncle Sam's joint owner in on your 401k and your IRA. So that's something to kind of realize there.
Yes, such an important conversation to have, Nick. And I think that, as you mentioned, being in a historically low tax rate right now, it's important to consider these Roth accounts. If somebody had questions for you about setting those up, what's the best way to reach you?
Well, one of the best ways is always to sit down. And what we like to figure out is how much money does somebody have in the tax now bucket, in the tax later bucket, in the tax never bucket. We talk about these three buckets, and it's part of getting a tax X-ray done is really to figure out how much of your money and where is it positioned and how tax at risk you are. Okay. Ultimately, we want as much money in that tax-free bucket as possible, that tax never bucket. But what we find is 95% of Americans have their money in that tax now bucket and that tax later bucket, which is really the two buckets that are taxed the worst. And so what we always talk about doing is a tax X-ray to find out what bucket you're in. And then ultimately, do we pay the taxes on the seed or the harvest? Is another strategy that we talk about with people is if tax rates are going up in the future, and if I was a farmer, do I want to pay taxes on the 10-cent seed or the $2 harvest for that ear of corn? And I'd rather pay taxes on the smaller amount now while tax rates are low versus growing this and having all this money and I'm getting taxed more and more and more down in the future. So a tax X-ray is absolutely crucial to this. And this is something that we do for people as well. It's part of, as part of financial planning. Part of financial planning is not just the investment side, but also the tax side. So people can reach out to us. They can call us at 407-960-4052. They can go to our website, which is group10financial.com. And they can set up a time to have a 15-minute virtual strategy session where we can talk these things through and figure out how tax at risk you are, because ultimately 2026 is right around the corner. When it goes up, that means we have 3 years to get some solid planning in place before that happens.
Right. Have that conversation. The earlier, the better. Nick, thank you very much.
Hey, good to be with you.